Check us out on YouTube, Facebook, and X. And for the premier sports talk experience, tap into our Roku channel. Start your mornings with Mac and Jack covering all the weekend sports action. Then pour a cup and enjoy all the sports you can drink on the Coffee and Sports podcast. At midday, talk sports from east to west on the Coast to Coast podcast. Followed at night by some hot girl talk with Prim and Proper Sports featuring Sonia Pearson. Talk boxing on the Gloved Fist. Yankee fans tune in for Start Spreading the News. And there's more on the College Sports Huddle and Sports Scope with Robert Butler. And that's just a sampling. There are 20 podcasts in all and 70 weekly shows giving us a 3.4-star viewer rating. To find us on Roku TV, search for National Streaming Sports on the Roku search bar. Click on the logo and you're in. For laptops, mobile phones, and tablets, download the Roku app. National Streaming Sports, live and on demand, sports talk for America.
Football season is here, and SeatGeek is my go-to for buying tickets. Now, with SeatGeek, every single ticket is backed with their buyer guarantee. We've all had plans change, and when you can't make it to the big game, SeatGeek has you covered. They're the only ticketer that allows you to return your tickets ahead of the event for credit with SeatGeek swaps. So when things come up, I know that my tickets won't go to waste. So what are you waiting for? Download the SeatGeek app to maximize your...
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Latirzo, part-time writer, full-time observer, joined by Mr. Jack Hirsch, former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America. In other words, I call Jack Mr. Happy because I think until you say something to make him crack a smile, he looks like he's mad and he just woke up or having a bad day.
Well, you could call me a subpar football handicapper, consistent. You could say that, Frank. I know.
Okay, Jack, but I'm not going to say that because that's 50.
You're just upset. I decided I was going to give you a pass for this show. No matter what you say to me, I'm not going to get insulted. Like what Joe Frazier said before the fight in Manila against Ali, nothing's going to upset me. I know his antics because Ohio State's about to win the national championship tonight. That's why you're so upset. I don't take it personal, Frank. You sniping at me. It's all about Ohio State. The moment you feared the most has come. It's here. It's there tonight. It's hours away from taking place, baby. Ohio State national champions. But you're hoping in the back of your mind for some little miracle with Notre Dame. You won't admit it. You won't admit it. But you're
Jack,
holding out that slight hope.
I'm hoping that my bet and the prospect of myself winning money is the jinx that it takes for Ohio State to get beat. It's carried me for many seasons, but every once in a while, they sneak up and bite me. The only thing I'll say about this is they clearly had the best team. I felt that before the season started. And look, I also felt when they lost to Michigan, I was happy that they lost, but I also felt it could be a catalyst for a run. It has turned out that that's the case. I think it gets crowned tonight. But, Jack, it just doesn't end with Ohio State. The Eagles, the Philadelphia Eagles, think about this. The two worst fan bases in this country, the Ohio State Buckeye fan base and the Philadelphia Vulture fan base, they are the worst winners in the world. They're the biggest crybabies when they lose. They make an excuse for everything, and they think that the sport revolves around them. So not only do I have to deal with Ohio State tonight, but the prospect that the Eagles are going to beat the Redskins in the NFC Championship, and the Chiefs are going to beat the Bills, and the Chiefs and the Eagles are going to meet. And then, Jack, here's my problem there. Who do I root for? Because if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, they will go down as the greatest team in the history of the NFL. They'll go down as the best ever. And if the Eagles win, I'm afraid that they might go on a run. So what's the lesser of two evils? I think it's the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs winning is the lesser of the two evils. I won't have to hear about them. And some people will say they're the greatest team ever. There's a case for that. It won't be etched in stone, but it'll be easier to live with. But I hate football this year. I can't wait for spring.
Better than that, Frank, if a player from Ohio State is drafted into the NFL, you mean you root against them? You let it go once he's in the NFL?
No, once they take
playing for the Eagles.
No, once they take the Buckeye uniform off, I'm good. Stroud, I like him. He's no longer a Buckeye. You know what hurts me though? Some of my SEC boys on the Eagles, like the center Dickerson and the lineman that they drafted from Georgia. When I watch the draft, I'm saying, "Oh no, why?" I watch these guys play at Georgia and Notre Dame, at Alabama. I know they're going to be good on the Eagles. And Jack, the same thing I'll have to say about the Eagles. As much as I loathe them, they are a great organization, and winning means something to them. And you and I should both be frustrated by that because your team, the Jets, and my team, the Dolphins, just can't get it right.
So between Floyd Mayweather and the Philadelphia Eagles, if you have to bow down to one of them, I mean, what can you stomach more? The Philadelphia Eagle fan base or the Floyd Mayweather, fan club who's calling him the greatest fighter of all time? Who can you stomach more?
Because I'm a bigger fan of boxing than I am football, but it's close. I can stomach. Oh, this is going to hurt.
Mayweather was greater than Sugar Ray Robinson.
Yeah, the Eagle fan base is easier to live with than the Mayweather.
So you would be sitting in your seat, standing up and clapping with the Eagle fans for the Eagles sooner than you would supporting the fanboys who say Mayweather was greater than Sugar Ray Robinson.
Right, but I just hope that the educated boxing people, Jack, and most of them, and the ones that we respect, they don't adhere to that mindset. The only thing is, in 50 years, when we're both gone and other people are writing the record books and the history books, they're going to see he was undefeated. They're going to look at the names he fought, and they're not going to do the homework to see when he fought them. And it's like Mayweather will move up in history.
You mentioned the key word undefeated here, okay? Turkey, I always never get his last name right, His Excellency. He came out with a statement that was really, really good. He said these fighters can't be obsessed with being unbeaten. It's got to be more like the UFC. But then he said something that kind of made Mayweather look too good. He says, oh, it only happens once every 50, 60, 70 years. Actually, what Willie Pep did and Sugar Ray Robinson, after they had only one loss, their record was superior to Mayweather. Mayweather would have had to go like 78 1-1 to match Willie Pep after his 50 wins. So let's not hear it. But I like the point that fighters have to get used to losing, and he's having a mini tournament that used to be like the NFL. 4 teams, the 4 fighters, the 2 losers meet one another, and then maybe the loser, the consolation match, gets to fight the winner if the winners fought twice in a row. And they're good matchups. It would be Haney against Ryan Garcia in a rematch, which you can argue would be a pick'em fight, perhaps. I mean, it's not an easy fight to necessarily predict right now. And then Boots Ennis against Teofimo Lopez. Risky fight for Lopez, the way I see it, going against Boots. But Lopez has had some trouble making the weight. He is a big puncher, even though he hasn't exhibited it, the last few fights. We know he could really whack, and it would be the most dangerous fight of Boots' career. But even if Lopez lost to Boots and got stopped, he would get a crack at the loser between Haney and Garcia. And let's say it's Garcia. Him and Lopez would do major business, even coming off losses. And the winner of that fight could step up the Boots-Haney winner. But something bothers me about those matchups, Frank. I can't picture Haney in with Boots. It's kind of like a physical, I don't want to say physical mismatch. Something is off. All these guys fighting Boots, like Garcia against Boots. Boots seems too big for these guys.
Yeah, I don't think they would be competitive fights. But Jack, the problem is the fans. The fans have been brainwashed that when a guy loses, that's it. He's not worth seeing. And I blame that on your buddy Floyd. I'm sorry. That mindset did not exist. Ali didn't retire undefeated. Leonard didn't retire undefeated. Hagler didn't retire undefeated until Mayweather came along. And the way he promoted himself, he made losing, if you lose, it is a mortal sin in the eyes of the fans. And the fans have no time for guys that have a loss. And I think that the fighters know that, Jack, and that's why they're so judicious with the way they pick their spots.
I don't think, I understand what you're saying, and you might be correct, but keep in mind, Mayweather didn't go through his whole career so worried necessarily about a legacy of being unbeaten. As he got a little late in his career, yeah, you think about it. You want to get out at the right time. You don't want a loss. We have all these guys who had a similar mindset. They say they're going to retire as champion. Okay? I mean, I once interviewed Mark Freeland, and this was in 1988. Keep in mind, he was a 1984 Olympic gold medalist. And I asked him, how much longer do you plan to keep fighting? He goes, oh, only a year or two more. We hear that all the time. These guys, they don't get it. Like Larry Holmes is talking about retiring unbeaten. You know, he lost the fights with Spinks, came out of retirement for Tyson, and it seemed he fought forever after that. And
Jack, once they lose that I think it takes the pressure off them, and I think then they realize, okay, I can't go undefeated, but I still have the capacity to make money, and I'm going to continue on, and a loss isn't going to hurt me that much because I've already lost. I really do think that plays a big part in their mindset and the way they think. Larry Holmes, you mentioned him with Tyson. You know, Jack, that's one fight I really can't figure out what he was thinking, because I thought Michael Spinks clearly beat him the first time. I thought Holmes shaded the second fight, but Holmes was not the same fighter he was against Cooney or against Weaver. He just wasn't the same guy. And I don't know if he really thought that he could beat Tyson. He said he fought because he wanted to buy another building and the money was good. But I don't know what he was thinking there.
I just thought of something. Can you imagine had Roberto Duran trained hard for the first step into Jesus' fight? He absolutely would have won the fight had he been the Roberto Duran we know, who came in shape, not just half shape, but in really tip-top shape. So he wins that fight, and then he retires after beating Sugar Ray Leonard, saying, this is how I want to go out. He would have been 73-0. And we would have been talking about Duran as the pound-for-pound greatest fighter of all time. We wouldn't have put anyone ahead of him. We would have said, well, it's between him and Robinson. That's what the discussion would have been. Between Duran and Robinson, take your pick.
Jack, even if he loses it to Jesus and comes and that's his only loss and retires 72-1, he's that's the same thing, because he did beat the Jesus twice. That wouldn't have been held against him. And if you retired after Leonard and then Leonard went on to do what he did, yes, that win gets bigger as the time passes. And we're going to get to this later, because we're going to talk about Crawford. It looks like it's going to happen, and he's going to fight Canelo. And I made a list of some of the biggest wins, at least in my lifetime, of fighters that had that legacy win that, you know, it's in that top 5. And Duran over Leonard is one of those. But, you know, he came back, he lost, and, you know, we know the history. But, yeah, it all depends on when you go out. If Roy Jones goes out after Ruiz, where's he at?
Exactly. You know what I'm thinking with the Crawford-Canelo fight? It's going to be fought with a weight limit of 168 pounds. And Crawford right now is a junior middleweight. Let's say he naturally grew from the welterweight into a junior middleweight. No rehydration clause. That means Canelo can come in at 181, 182 on fight night. But for Crawford, I kind of wonder, he's allowed to get up to 168. Is it going to hurt him? Is it going to help him? Because for the first time in his career, since he's on the championship level, he's not going to have to worry about making weight. He's going to make 168 easy. It's going to be kind of the way Emil Griffith did it when, he fought for the middleweight title, 160-pound limit. He comes in at, 152?
Yeah, 153, 152. I think Crawford's going to have to find the weight, Jack, that he feels the most comfortable. And I'd be willing to bet that he wouldn't come in over like 162. I think he's smart enough to know that just because you're afforded that weight, it may not be you at your best, and you may lose something and the advantage that you have. So I don't think he would come in at a full-fledged 168, but I do think he would come in at close to the 160, 61 mark.
And there are a couple of ways to look at it, how the fight might go. Crawford does not have Mayweather's legacy. You could say all you want. You think he would have beaten Mayweather head-to-head when they were in their prime. That's all speculative. You can't say with absolute confidence who would have beaten who. And if someone says it with absolute confidence, I think they're off base. Either guy could have won the fight. It doesn't mean it necessarily would have been a close fight. But it's a tough fight to call as far as I'm concerned.
In my mind, Jack, just hold your thought for a second. In my mind, and look, it's only in my mind. It's not on, it's nothing that means anything. But I want to say this before the fact. I am more sure that if Crawford and Mayweather fought at their best between 135 and 147, I am more sure that Crawford would defeat Mayweather than I am that Ohio State will beat Notre Dame tonight. And I couldn't be more sure about that. I just think it's a bad match. I think there are guys that Mayweather may match up better with, but I think those two head-to-head, I think Crawford would take him. But I agree, there's not, unless Crawford went up and beat Usyk, there's no way he'll go down as a greater fighter than Mayweather legacy-wise.
But this applies to all great fighters. Unless they're forced to show something, they might not. Case in point, Ali with the rope-a-dope. If every Ali opponent was, let's say, like a Jerry Quarry, wouldn't put on relentless pressure, maybe move forward, he could have danced well into his career. I mean, providing he trained hard for the fight, okay? He wouldn't need the rope-a-dope. So until he showed us he can take a punch, he can survive on the ropes, there were doubts about it. Remember the article that was written in Ring Magazine, but Joe Louis, they taught him how I would have clobbered Clay. And
I remember.
Clay's one weakness, you get him on the ropes. He didn't think he could fight off the ropes. And come on, we saw, what he could do fighting off the ropes. How he could survive against the Foreman and Joe Frazier by fighting off the ropes.
Right. But that's the thing, Jack. It's like, what's better? To win overwhelmingly where it's no contest, like Frazier beating Foreman or Crawford beating Spence, or going hammer and nail with a guy like Leonard and Hearns or Ali and Frazier and then pulling it out. See, sometimes I think you're viewed in a better light when you have to kind of catch a little bit of hell before you get through and to the other side of the tunnel, where if you blow a guy out, look, same thing. If Crawford were to beat Spence, Canelo, easily or overwhelmingly, they'll say Canelo was washed up. They'll say it was old.
Mayweather would say, look what I did to Canelo. I beat him easy. Years later, Canelo's got nothing left now. That
he could say that
argument, and you'd have people buy into that.
The other side of that, Jack, is the fact that Crawford or Mayweather made Canelo come down to 152, and Canelo was nowhere near the fighter that fought Mayweather that's out there right now, mentally, stylistically, or physically.
And, you know, as far as legacy goes, I don't think Canelo is ever going to be on anyone's short list of all-time greats within any division or whatever. When you talk about the great fighters pound for pound, I think he's going to be classified when all is said and done more along the lines of an Oscar De La Hoya, tremendously respected. But when you compare him to the Sugar Ray Leonards, the Roy Joneses, just like De La Hoya, he's going to be like a notch below. I
agree with that.
You could argue he could have a seat on the bus with them of all-time greats, but he's going to be told to get kind of towards the middle of the back of the bus, you know, not be all the way in the front. You know, the Leonards and the Durans, they could sit up there with the Sugar Ray Robinsons, you know, the Harry Grebs. They could have a special, you know, seat in the front.
Well, let me ask you this. To drill down a little bit more, what's Canelo's signature win? Is it the rematch with Golovkin?
You kind of think so off the top of my head. I mean, and that fight could have gone either way. I mean, but Golovkin was still really, really good then. You know, but you know, fight fans are a lot more knowledgeable than we maybe give them credit for. And I'll give you an example. What you just said, something that's thought-provoking. If we got the most knowledgeable boxing authorities, let's say, and had them vote in their prime who was a greater fighter, pound for pound, Golovkin or Canelo, and the vote came in, and let's say we got 30 of them to vote, I kind of feel about 17, 18 would vote for Golovkin.
I'm not sure who I think would come out on top, Jack. I think Canelo's shown that he's a little bit more stylistically diverse fighter. He does have better names on his record. And I think as far as head-to-head, he's 2-1 versus Triple G. But some will say that it wasn't, you know, vintage Triple G. But I think that's a tough one.
Yeah, okay, but it's arguable that. But so, what do you think of the doubleheader that's proposed? That there's a good chance it will take place because the Saudis offer so much money. These fights get made. They get made, and Garcia-Haney the rematch. I mean, has Haney? I get the feeling Haney really hasn't been training hard until maybe recently. He was very demoralized by the loss. As far as Garcia goes, who knows with Garcia?
What weight are they going to fight at?
That is a good question. I would think it would be 147 that Boots would have to stay at 140. So it might be 154. It might be
Wait, Jack. Garcia and Haney, 154?
No, I'm not saying it. Definitely 147, at least. Boots can't get down to under 147, and if it's a tournament...
Jack, wait a second. You're talking about something. You're talking about Boots. You said Garcia and Haney.
The winner between Garcia and Haney would have to fight the winner between Boots Ennis and Teofimo Lopez.
Okay, to make it easy,
right?
Boots is going to beat Teofimo Lopez. What weight are Haney and Garcia fighting at?
I believe it would have. Well, I don't know for sure. Definitely, if they fought Boots, it would have to be a 147.
Right. But are they? So they're going to fight each other at 47?
I believe so. I'm not certain of it. I believe so.
Well, if Garcia and Haney fight at 147, I clearly like Garcia in that fight. I think mentally he has the edge, and I think the higher up in weight they go, I think it'll favor him because I think he'll be faster. He's clearly the bigger puncher, so I think that Garcia will beat Haney if they fight at 40 or 47. I have no doubt that Boots will beat Lopez, so then the two winners would fight.
The two and the two losers.
Okay.
That would be it. So if you pick, then it would be Haney and Teofimo if it turned out the way you thought, and Garcia in Boots. I know, like you, I think of Haney as being more like a lightweight, a junior welterweight, Haney, not a welterweight. And Garcia, who's had some weight issues. I guess the welterweight division's a natural for him now.
Today, they probably both struggle to make 140.
Right, so it'd be 147 to the one, and Teofimo's had weight issues, but he can make 147, I think, okay. So the one guy who might have the biggest issue with 147 might actually be Boots, perhaps.
Right. But I think he'd make it for that fight. So yes, I like that card, and I would like to see the two fights, and then the winners and the losers fight. That's pretty ingenuitive, and that's something new. That His Excellency is bringing something to the table besides just money, and he's forcing these guys to fight each other. I like that. But Jack, let me just go back to something that we were talking about. Back to Canelo. Okay, we both agree without him fighting Benavidez, his signature win is probably going to be, if the world ended today, we'll agree it's the rematch with Golovkin. If he beats Canelo, does that surpass? I mean, if he beats Crawford, does that surpass it?
I believe so at this stage in his career. I believe in large part Canelo is going to kind of be remembered for this fight. Okay, it depends how the fight goes too. If it's a so-so fight, it goes to a decision, and Canelo wins the split decision. 2 cards of 7-5, one way, 1-7-5 the other way, and it's not a particularly exciting fight. It's just a so-so fight. I think it might fall under the category of the rubber match between Leonard and Duran. No one cares about that fight. No one hardly talks about it. I'm mentioning it now. It didn't enhance Leonard's legacy at all to say, oh, I won 2 out of 3. No one gives a darn, that about that third fight. They care about the first and the second. And I kind of feel that might be the case here. Canelo's legacy, I can't see changing much. But if he really wanted to change it and be considered a true all-time great, not for consistency, join the short lists, be compared to the Leonards, the Haglers, be put on that level, as a pound-for-pound all-time great. You have to take on a David Benavidez and knock him out in spectacular fashion. You do that, everyone's mouth is hanging. Oh, this Canelo, he's so great. I think Pacquiao's legacy is greater than Canelo's. How do you like that? More people are going to call Pacquiao a greater fighter than Canelo pound for pound. Because Pacquiao, the Mayweather fight got delayed 5 years. Pacquiao lost that fight, but supporters of Pacquiao don't seem to care. They feel, well, they was late in their career, this and that. And
that fight was really 5 years too late, or at least 4. They should have fought after Floyd beat Hatton and Pacquiao beat
Miguel
Cotto. They should have fought.
That would have been a spectacular matchup of both of them in the prime of their careers. I mean, we didn't even get Oscar. Oscar De La Hoya was past his peak when he fought Mayweather, and he ran him close. This is Mayweather in his prime. That's the one red flag with Mayweather that kind of bothers me a little bit, because that was a super fight. It was like the biggest fight of his career. He had to pull out all the stops, and he could just he legitimately won the fight, in my opinion, but it was a split decision, and it was, a close fight all in all.
All right, Jack, what I've done, and I'm just making a note here, since we kind of agree that Canelo and Crawford are probably going to fight, I made a list of the 5 biggest wins of my lifetime. Actually, as we're thinking, I could add one more to that. Give me a couple of yours, and I'll give you a couple of mine.
Look at the shirt I have on. Obviously, the fight of the century, Frazier over Ali.
Okay, that's on my list.
You also have to Ali, the way he beat Foreman.
That's on my list.
That would be on the list. Really monster victories. Listen, if you want to talk about a monster victory, it was an upset, but it jarred the heck out of us. Buster Douglas over Tyson. But
that's not on my list. But that's there's a case for that. What's interesting on my list? I have 6 fights, and it's funny that Ali and Leonard make up 4 of the fights, and they were the winner and the loser in 2 of the fights. My list is this. Of my lifetime, I started watching boxing in 1964. I would say the biggest wins in my life that I would, if I made a list, which I have, would be chronologically Clay over Liston, Frazier over Ali.
Yeah.
Ali over Foreman.
Yeah.
Duran over Leonard. Spinks over Holmes. And Leonard over Hagler. Does Crawford over Canelo come close to any of those?
Well, one of the things when you talk about biggest wins, it was easier to judge in the past when it was on closed circuit, or if you're at the arena. How are people leaving? Are they leaving in a buzz? Hagler Hearns, people left, it was a buzz. Wow, what did we just see? It was only 3 rounds, but there was a certain buzz, to that particular fight.
The way I look at it, Jack, is how formidable the loser was perceived going into that fight. Clay over Liston. At the time, and you know this as well as I do, there were a lot of experts that thought that Liston was so great, he might even be greater than Joe Louis. Nobody expected Clay to win. Clay handled him. Frazier Ali, that has to be on there because Ali was just undefeated and he just fought. He was
that was the greatest, biggest fight of all time.
Okay.
Undisputed. No explanations needed. Fight of the century.
Ali over Foreman. No explanations needed.
Correct.
Duran over Leonard. Duran moves up from welterweight. Never even fought for the junior welterweight title and fights a guy and beats Leonard close, but beats him somewhat conclusively. And Leonard is consensus top 5 welterweight. And some people have him as high as 2. I know I do. Spinks over Holmes. Yeah, Holmes was 35, but you know what? He hadn't lost. He's another top 5 all-time great heavyweight. Spinks moves up in one fight. His previous fight before Holmes, he weighs 173 or 174. Then he fights Holmes, who is 50 pounds bigger than any challenger he ever fought. He wins that fight. That has to be up there. And then I would say Leonard over Hagler.
Just about that Spinks Holmes, Mackie Shilstone was telling me when they had the weigh-in, they put the needle for Spinks because he was a light heavyweight up that. They put it at 180 to see whether they have to move it a pound or 2 either way. And they told me, I was told that Holmes' eyes was bugging out because they kept moving the needle up till it got to 200 and everyone was like jawed, There was no inclination. He actually had some light heavyweight title defenses where he weighed 170 and a half.
I know
that's how light he was. But let me say one fight. You mentioned Duran Leonard. Don't you think Leonard Hearns 1 was more dramatic? Because you had Sugar Ray coming from behind. I think that was more dramatic.
Jack, I'm not talking about great fights. No, I'm not talking about great fights.
Okay.
I'm talking about what
they asked Leonard once, What was a bigger win for you? You know, and between the two fights, stopping Hearns in the 14th round, coming from behind, or beating Hagler. And he said he keeps going back and forth. You know, he's thought about it a lot. He's not sure which of the two actually he cherished, you know, more as being like bigger.
The only reason why I think Duran winning over Leonard is bigger is because Duran came up 12 pounds, was considered at that time a huge jump. Everyone knew how great Leonard was, and he might not go down as Robinson's equal, but he was probably going to go down as one of the greats. Where when Leonard beat Hearns, Jack, nobody at that time was saying that Hearns is one of the all-time greats. Now, he proved it. He was. But at the time going in, I don't think it was inconceivable to see either guy winning. Where I think a lot of people couldn't see Duran beating Leonard.
I want to adjust what you said about Roberto Duran. He was a lightweight. Like you say, he bypassed the junior welterweight division, went right to the welterweight division, but he didn't fight Leonard in his first fight. He beat Carlos Palomino, a Hall of Fame welterweight, by the way, a Hall of Fame.
He had 7 fights where he weighed over 145 before he fought Leonard.
Right. So it's not like he did it like one fight. Crawford seems to be doing this in one fight. You know, 168. You know, he's contracted for 154. But I don't think Terence Crawford, I think fighters have to hit a decline at some point. It bothers me how he looked against Madrimov. This wasn't the same Terence Crawford to me. You and I see something different. You feel he looked practically like his old self, but he just...
No, not his old self. I think it was a style thing more than him being eroded.
I think Terence Crawford in his prime was so great. A style wouldn't have given him that much trouble in his prime. That's the way I feel about him.
Okay, that's a fair point.
You know, I think it's, I guess, a combination of a couple of things. The inactivity, and he's been inactive since then. I don't know what version of Terence Crawford shows up. You're going to get a good version, but is it good enough to beat a Canelo who's technically sound, is going to be able to punch well to the body, who's probably, my guess would be a little physically stronger, at least on the inside, but who knows? But if Terence Crawford shows up, unlike you have more faith in him than me if we talk about him as an all-time great. But I have more faith in him that if he's at his absolute best and Canelo's at his best, I think he defeats Canelo. That's how great.
If it's Crawford that fought Spence, do you give him a chance?
I give him a great chance. The Crawford.
What if by some chance, Jack? Here's what throws a monkey wrench into the whole thing. I don't see this happening, but I mean anything's possible. What if Crawford stopped Canelo? How big would that be?
If he genuinely stopped him in spectacular fashion,
where he's beating the hell out of him, Jack, and the referee has to pull him off.
You want to know something? You're going to see Floyd all over social media, because you know what's going to happen? The current fanboys are going to be attracted to Crawford, and the talk is going to be who would have won between Mayweather and Crawford. We don't hear a lot of that now. It would be a MJ LeBron debate. How's about that? Boxing's version of MJ LeBron would be, it would take full force. It would, come around.
I like the comparison. I can see that. If Crawford were to stop Canelo, and I can't really envision that, but if he did, that would be stop the world. That would be huge, and that would change everything, because he will have done something that no one has ever come close to doing.
Let me throw this at you too. Let's say it's just the opposite. Let's say Canelo stops Crawford, a decisive victory. Let's say stops him in 9 rounds, a body shot, and let's say after the rehydration clause, after he makes 168, Canelo comes in at 184 into the ring. And then David Benavidez knocks out David Morrell. You know what people are going to be saying? Oh, Canelo's a coward. He's scared of Benavidez. Hey, I don't want to hear excuses of Benavidez being bigger. Look what Canelo weighed. You know?
Yeah, they're saying that about Canelo now, Jack. It would escalate if that were the case.
It would escalate if that were the case. You know, decisive victory there over Crawford. And if Crawford came in, let's say, at argument's sake, didn't worry about the weight, came in after he rehydrated, he came in, let's say, at 159, 25 pounds less. They would hold it against Canelo, a decisive victory. Say, this was a much smaller guy. You know, Vasily Lomachenko did something that was really kind of nice in a way. Right after beating Guillermo Rigondeaux, he said, don't give me much credit. This is a much smaller guy. You know, I don't want to get...
I said that before the fight.
Yeah, and he said it after. He said, it's not that big a deal. You know, I was a lot bigger guy. You know, I don't want to give myself too much credit for it. And he meant it, you know. That was kind of refreshing to see.
You know, it's funny. Lately, I've seen on Facebook where you had that link for the videos, and that they're going around asking fighters, who wins, this guy or that guy. And then when they have the guy losing, then they insert another guy.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see a lot of talk where Lennox Lewis has come out and said that has no doubt that he would have defeated Usyk. And it makes me think a little bit, Jack, that he may be a little uneasy that Usyk is getting that bachelor treatment where he's really his legacy and persona is really growing, almost to the point where I'm starting to think that maybe Lewis feels a little insecure that it might be an issue with him.
Yeah, I get tired of hearing Lewis and Larry Holmes talk like they want full credit, like Holmes, oh, well, I beat Ali. I proved I'm better because I beat him. But then Holmes says, well, the only reason I lost to Tyson, I wasn't given enough time to train. So he wants us to dismiss his knockout loss to Tyson, but give him full credit for beating Ali. And Lennox Lewis, they asked him about Tyson. He said, well, we were both in our prime at the time. His argument is, well, we were about the same age. Look, Lewis beating Tyson was a nice win for Lewis. Even a deteriorated Tyson was a threat. So I give Lewis a lot of credit for winning it, but he didn't fight a prime Tyson. Holmes certainly didn't fight a prime Ali. I give them still credit for having a nice victory. And I'll tell you, I don't always want to give the losers a pass in fights like this just because they're past their peak. Because an example would be if Foreman knocked Ali out the way most people expected, we would have said, oh, Ali was past his peak. He had the layoff, this, that. That's what drives me crazy with these fanboys. They say, oh, the reason Ali lost to Frazier, he was out of the ring all that time. He would have just played with Frazier if he didn't have the layoff. Yet Ali beats Foreman, 3.5 years later? So I don't want to hear it. Ali's good enough to beat a monster.
Jack, the only thing I'll say to that is, Ali was out for 43 months and only fought twice in 5 months after that. So that's a fact.
But he had 2 fights going into the fight of the century. He was 29 years old. He had a full
Jack, he only had 18 rounds of boxing, though, and he looked terrible against Bonavina until the 15th round. But here's where I'll come back and agree with you. And I've had this debate many times. Now, we both were at that fight. If somebody would have said, and we were both young and we didn't know then what we know now, but if someone would have said to me, hey, see that guy in the red trunks? He's coming off a 3.5-year layoff. He's really not good. He's not on his game. I would say, are you kidding me? If that guy's on his game, it would be illegal to allow him to fight. So Ali didn't look like a guy who had come off the layoff, and he did not look like a guy who was at a disadvantage. But On the calendar, he did, but for the guys that think that Ali would have played with Frazier if he hadn't had, if he would have had another couple months, there's no version of Ali that would ever play with Joe Frazier. None ever.
Let me ask another question. The Ali that lost to Frazier that night, supposedly the Ali who was coming off the layoff, that Ali, that's the only reason he lost to Joe, blah, blah, blah. How many heavyweights in history to this time would have beaten the Ali of that night? And I'll tell you this, without going over the individuals, I can guarantee you that it's less than one hand, the number. Since
Jack.
1971, I'm including the whole crew of great heavyweights that came after that and before that.
Jack, I'll take it one step further, and I've had this debate before. I think that was one of the best fights that Ali ever fought, and I don't know how many guys in history, other than that Joe Frazier, would have defeated him that night.
Yeah, but we talk about, but you talk about layoffs with certain fighters, and you just, in this day and age, it seems to be self-imposed. But even the old timers of the past, we forget. They took time off too. They didn't always fight. The Dempsey Tunney fights. Jack Dempsey was off for 3 years.
3 years, yes.
Why a 3-year layoff? I don't want to hear
self-imposed, though.
Self-imposed. I mean, and even the great Rocky Marciano, his manager Al Will, didn't want him defending his title more than twice a year because he felt there was overexposure. Eddie Futch, when he took over Frazier's career for Yank Durham, he said, no, Joe's on a 2-fight-a-year schedule. The year Joe beat Ali, only fought once that year.
Yep.
And then he fought twice the next year, 1972. The inactivity gets him, and that's why I'm a little down on Crawford before the Canelo fight. He's had too much inactivity, Frank.
Jack, he's in a crazy situation because he has a lot to lose and he wants the big money fight. But the way boxing is today, it's just the business of it is just crazy. And some of these guys, and the way the TV is set up, it is a little bit hard for them to stay active. Now, while we were talking, our buddy Lehman Pauly just sent me something, and he said Turkey Al-Ashiki has now officially confirmed the first Ring Magazine USA card in May. Ryan Garcia versus Rolly Romero.
Oh.
Devin Haney versus Jose Ramirez.
Wait,
Martin. Yes, yeah. Versus Jose Ramirez. And Martin Bacoli versus Effie Ajagba.
It's not that strong a card, I'll be honest. I'm not impressed. I am not impressed. Rolly Romero, Garcia's miles better than him. I mean, Garcia should knock him out. The next fight, Devin Haney, Jose Ramirez he's long in the tooth now. A little long in the
good
tooth.
Fighter. But he's made for Haney. He'll come right to him.
Right, unless Haney's layoff and he's lost focus and everything, Haney's better than
But Jack, you can see what's going on. That card is to build up Haney and Garcia rematch, and to give Bacoli some more exposure because he should knock out Effie Ajagba.
Right. But the card itself, Lehman, thanks for giving us that info. It doesn't do much for me. To me, it should be a free TV type card. I'm certainly not going to pay for a card like that. But getting back, we were talking a little while ago activity. Shakur Stevenson next month. He fights Floyd Schoenfeld on a great card put on by the Saudis, by the way, headed by the Bivol Beterbiev rematch. But I like
the end of February.
I like what I read from Shakur Stevenson today in regard to a fight against Tank Davis. He says, look, I know I'm not the A side. He's saying Tank is the A side and I'm the B side. I don't expect to get 50-50, but let's negotiate and let's see where the negotiation goes. could
I
have
like
said
that.
it more perfectly. I like it. He's saying, let's sit down, let's talk, let's see where it could be headed. For all we know, Frank, Stevenson could say, okay, 75% you, 25% me. You're the A side, I'm the B side. Stevenson might want the opportunity so bad. He might think 25% fighting Tank is double what I could make fighting anyone else, and it'll make me a star. You know, in large part, it's opportunity. But I like the way he said, let's negotiate and just see what happens. That's fair. You can't be more fair than that if you.
I like that. Jack, is it me? But because of the inactivity and these fights getting drug out and strung out, it's been a little bit harder to follow this sport and to stay on top of it. I mean, other than going on Boxing Scene and seeing if there's any news, it's getting a little harder for me to be so engaged because there's just nothing going on.
Well, that's something. I just want to give you an update, Frank. Okay, a minute and 47 seconds has gone by. Ohio State, Notre Dame, no score.
Okay.
So a minute and 47. It's like a marathon race. They finished the first.
I'd like to know who had the ball first, because
Notre
Ohio State,
Dame
I believe,
has the ball now on their own 36. So
who has it?
Notre Dame, but that maybe they got it back on a fumble. Maybe they held Ohio State. I have no clue. But Notre Dame has it on their own 36. It's uneventful right now.
Ohio State has scored on their first possession in all three playoff games.
Yeah, I don't know. I shouldn't say Ohio State had the ball first. Maybe Notre Dame got the kickoff and got a first down or two. I'm sorry. I was out of line what I just said. Okay.
But Jack, do you follow me as far as it's just a little harder to stay engaged lately?
In the sport, well, you know what it is? We're spoiled as far as big shows. They're going to have a great show on February
22nd, I think.
Right, that's a great card. And what makes it nice in a way.
That's a month away.
But it takes place in the day in the East Coast because of the time situation.
I like that.
You put your whole Saturday aside. That's what I'm doing on my day. I'm just watching boxing, and you're getting 7 really good fights.
No, I like that. I just don't like waiting a month for it.
Well, I mean, fighters don't fight that often. It's not like they're going to fight each month. I kind of wonder if the Saudis really wanted to do it bad enough, and they wanted to make it like it was in the 30s and 40s, telling guys, we expect you to be back 3 weeks later fighting the same guy.
Right.
I wonder, could they sign these guys to contracts, not for one fight, but a number of fights where they have to fight within a certain time limit, where a fighter's going to have to fight, 15, 18 times a year. That's what I thought Terrence Crawford and Shakur Stevenson should have did when they were with ESPN. Obviously, financially, because of the Saudis, it's going to pay off for Crawford doing things his way, assuming that fight comes up. With Shakur Stevenson, forced the issue. I would go into Bob Arum's office when he was promoted by Top Rank and say, look, I have a plan. It's a great gimmick that we could promote. I'm going to fight once a month for a year. We're going to call it old school boxing or whatever. And ESPN's going to know to feature him each month. And he's going to say, look, the money's going to be low for certain fights. Don't worry about it. I might get no more than a few $100,000 a fight, $400,000.
Yeah, they won't fight for that today.
No. But he's going to be allowed to get a few of them pretty easy opponents, who've been around a while, who can handle themselves, but realistically aren't going to be a serious threat. But they don't want to do it.
I mean, in theory, it makes sense. I just can't see these guys gloving up for that money. Two things. A friend of mine sent me something today where he said that Bob Arum recently said that Sugar Ray Leonard is one of the greatest defensive fighters ever. And my buddy said, Frank, that just goes to show that you don't have to know a lot about boxing to be a promoter. I think he's right. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, I found a picture the other day, Jack, of Joe Louis being introduced in the ring before the first Ali Frazier fight. Do you remember if any other fighters were announced that night? Because I don't remember people being brought up in the ring.
I remember Jimmy Ellis getting in there with this fancy leopard outfit or something. And then
like a print outfit.
I got to tell you a story about Joe Louis that night. I did a story for the publication Boxing News on Paul Simonetti. Paul Simonetti fought on the undercard, winning a 4-round decision over John Clohessy. And on the 50th anniversary, I interviewed him. And he told me after his fight, he didn't have an assigned seat. He just stayed in the corridor and stood up watching the whole thing. And on his way out, he ran into Joe Louis. And he said, Joe, you could have knocked them both out. And Joe Louis said with a smile, no, don't say that. Both Ali and Frazier are great fighters. Joe was like humble. But, he was telling me Simonetti was managed by two-ton Tony Galento. And before his fight that day, Galento took Simonetti to Jack Dempsey's restaurant. Jim Braddock was there. And it was to pump his young protege up, Galento.
That's pretty cool.
That's called the stuff we could have been around, Frank, but we were young and naive. I would have went to Jack Dempsey's. Can you imagine being able to sit with Dempsey and Jimmy Braddock and just,
That would have been so cool.
Oh, man, like you were Georgie Benton. Well, you had the man right there. You could have picked the man's brain,
You're right.
Frank. You're too young, to give it any thought.
Jack, but do you remember any other fighters being introduced? Because I remember Artie Idella saying that everybody's here and we're not bringing everybody up.
No, Johnny Addy. I remember that now. Johnny Addy said too many or whatever. But I do remember Ellis getting in the ring.
Ellis in the ring. I remember he had on an orange and yellow shirt.
Let me tell you, if I ask you this question, comes under the category in a way like the coolest ever. What was the most thrilling pre-fight introduction, before a fight? They used to call guys in the ring. I got one in mind, the one I enjoyed the most of all, which is off.
Well, tell me why I think of mine.
I'll tell you. In the movie Rocky 1, when they announced Smoking Joe Frazier and the Apollo Creed character, because Ali went to see the movie and he didn't know what was there. And could you imagine? He knew all along he was Apollo Creed. And when he saw Frazier come in the ring, Ali must have been, he was thrilled beyond words. It's probably going crazy when he said, "You've been ducking me for long. You next,
yep.
Joe. You next." And Apollo was acting his mannerisms like Ali. Joe Frazier, go home, leave the arena. But
Jack, the funniest ring introduction is before the Quarry Shavers fight, when Ali, Frazier, and Foreman all get into the ring, and Ali's like a little kid. He didn't know who to bother.
I stand corrected. That was the best one. But now it would be a bother. These guys are getting ready for the main event. You don't have them, whatever. You know what's interesting about boxing too, Frank? The national anthem. If it's another sport and the anthem's being played and you had the quarterback passing the ball back and forth, loosening up, social media would be all over him. But in boxing, a guy can bounce up and down during the anthem and he's given a pass because everyone realizes he doesn't want to go stiff, has to warm up and stay loose. Yeah.
But Jack, nothing was funnier. And poor Floyd Patterson, he's there too, and they call him up and nobody pays attention to him.
I'm going to let you off because Notre Dame has the ball on the Ohio State 7-yard line, 3rd and 3, Frank. So I'm sure you can't wait to get off, to see whether Notre Dame is going on a serious drive to start the game.
They're not going to win.
But I'll tell you, if they punch it in and they go up, 7-0. If they ought to win, that's the way to do it. They're not going to.
That is the way to do it, to give to shock Ohio State a little bit. I just read today where they haven't defeated Ohio State.
4th and 1 on the Ohio State 5. If they go for a field goal, they're wimping out. They are wimping out if they go for the
4th and 1. No, they have to go for they have to go for the first down.
Absolutely, and if they interesting. Okay, Frank.
Jack, real quick, picks for next weekend. I have the Chiefs and the Eagles.
I have the Chiefs and the Eagles as well.
All right, Jack. Great show.
Okay.
Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week.